Hello, Bill.
Hello, Sandi. How are you?
A bit concerned about our conversation this evening because
Why is that?
I'm not sure that we're in quite the right frame of mind to have a conversation about dark matter.
Do you think we're going to fall down some sort of well of black hole, as it were?
I think both of us have elements of black hole at the moment in our.
Yeah, we're a pair today.
Actually, speaking of wells, I have been to Glastonbury today, and I've been at the Chalice Well, and I did bathe in the waters, and I did drink them. And
Now, I looked that up today. What does the Chalice Well signify? What's the 15-second history on why it's important, and what does it do for you if you drink from it?
well, it's very very special. I mean, Glastonbury as a whole place is very kind of mystical, special. But the Chalice Well is meant to be where the chalice was put in the ground, as in the Grail. So
Okay.
waters are really healing, and there is something very special about the place, the gardens where you can go. Very sort of reflective place. Lots of people making quiet pilgrimage there, even non-Christians like me.
So this is sort of a Dan Brown kind of thing.
I hope not.
Okay. Because that'd be cool. I like those novels.
Of course you do. Dark matter.
Yes.
You were telling me a fun fact. You were speaking to somebody, and they were the person who coined the phrase.
Dark energy, actually, which is a separate thing from dark matter, but yes, equally unexplained.
Well, do you want to give us the 15-second lowdown on dark energy?
On dark energy versus dark matter?
Yeah.
Dark matter, we don't know why it's there, but we know that it makes up, some ridiculous amount of the universe. Something like 90% of the universe is dark matter. And we don't really know what it's made of or what it's doing or how it got there, but we know that something is there. And so we call it dark matter because we don't know any better.
So something is there, but it's not there because we can't really.
It has gravitational force, I think, but we can't measure. We have no idea what it is making the gravitational force. But dark energy has to do with inflationary properties of space in the universe and cosmology. Yeah. I got stuck in a room, not stuck in a room. It was amazing. I was in a green room with him because we were waiting for Philip Glass to show up.
Wow. Also
and then
people, Bill.
Well, then Philip Glass showed up and allowed me to take one picture of him going like this. But yeah, it was fun. It's a cooler part of my job. But yeah, so wait, why did you decide to call this dark matter? Because we're discussing like black matters and therefore it's dark matter, or do you actually have a significance to the cosmological study?
Well, I mean, you just said something there about from what somebody like me can understand from what you're saying about the difference between dark matter and dark energy, and the fact that we know something's there, but it's not, or that there is a quality or something about it that as humans we try to quantify or name or put some kind of form to.
Sure.
I think this is almost like the story of what we're going to talk about, but also the story just of humans in general, is that we find things that are nameless and shapeless, formless, nothingness. We find it almost impossible to deal with.
Yeah, it's true.
So
I think go ahead.
No, we're gonna look only at two images because we're doing a shorter conversation this evening.
Yeah.
And they're very different images, as we'll see. But I mean, you've probably seen this at MoMA. I don't know if it's on display actually, but it is at MoMA.
I haven't seen it in a while. Am I right to say that the edges are actually darker, right?
It's actually divided into 9. It's a grid.
Oh, it is. Okay. But it's very minimal, like very slight gradations.
Well, it's the experience of being in a gallery with images where one expects to have some kind of sensory stimulation, and where perhaps, you know, if we were in MoMA together and this was on display and we were walking around, I wonder how much time each viewer would give to paintings of different styles, and often, not always, but often in what I'd think of as general or bigger main galleries that aren't devoted just to modern art, the kind of pictorial, mannerist, representational art commands quite a lot of attention because we are snagged on detail. We want to try and understand what the picture is telling us in terms of a story.
Yep.
Whereas paintings like this, people can walk past these things without giving them any time and actually miss that there's like content. And I find that fascinating in and of itself because, you know, can an artist make something that is of nothing?
Well, you know, I was about to, you know, interrupt you at the end there and say they like the pictorial stuff because there's more to see, is what I was about to say. Sort of in some ways making your point, right? In that we think that there's more to see because it's more superficially complicated, you know, more complex. There's more detail and stuff to pull out. Yeah. I think that a lot of work like this ends up being, ironically, even though it's actually reflecting very little light, it's kind of a mirror of the viewer, isn't it? I mean, you end up seeing what you want to see in it.
Yes, and we do project into, I mean, we project into all work. You and I have always projected into everything we've ever spoken about, something of ourselves.
Yeah, true.
We're doing it all the time. When we are faced with a painting such as this, I mean, it's not vast, but it's still quite a large painting. I think it's about 1.5 square-ish, maybe a bit bigger.
Yep.
You know, what are we doing? We talked last week about things that are very large scale pieces of work where one is sort of taken in and perhaps immersed in art. I wonder how many people actually want to be immersed into blackness.
Well, do you, okay, well, I would say that this is definitely the kind of work that does work better because it's large, in the sense that I feel like it needs to sort of fill your field of vision in a lot of ways in order to be engulfing. But at the same time, I wonder if having a piece of art like this up in a room with 6 other similar-ish pieces from the same period actually detracts from it, because, you know, you're instantly comparing it to all the other sort of minimalist color field kind of things on other walls. Oh, there's the black one, there's the white one, here's the whatever. And I think maybe if it was just this thing in a room by itself, you would see it differently than you do if you do go to MoMA and see it in a room full of similar pieces.
Do you always compare, if you are in a gallery space and there are multiple paintings, are you always comparing them?
If I walk into a room that's got 7 or 8 paintings, 1 or 2 of them will draw my eye and I will go look at those first.
Okay, but is that the same as the kind of comparison that you're really talking about?
Well, I don't know that in a room full of work that I would necessarily take. I always worry when I'm looking at art that I am going to become art blind. You know that feeling of where you've looked at too much art after 45 minutes or an hour and you're not even looking at them anymore. The information's going in, but your brain is overloaded with information. You ever feel that way? You don't feel that way? See, I get that way very easily. So a lot of times when I'm in a gallery, I will edit out things that don't initially pique my interest because I don't want to sort of use up my appetite on stuff that doesn't interest me from the get-go. Even if someone explained it to me or brought me to it or wanted me to enjoy it in a certain way, I probably would. I don't naturally go to it, you know? I mean, one of the nice things about living, say, in the city and having a membership to someplace like MoMA is that I could go in and just look at one room and leave. And all I ever look at is one room every time I go in. It's probably the smart way to do it. What? Why are you making faces?
Actually, it wasn't making a face, Bill. That was my smile, but thanks for being so insulting. I understand going in and editing out. To me, that seems a cruel way to approach art. But I think it does kind of support the point that maybe what is there is lost in this.
Sure.
You know, how many people stay long enough with it? How many people approach it? And how many people see the fact that it is a grid? But more to the point, and really the point of the presentation is, in dark matters where things are black, do we choose them? Do we have an innate sense of fear? I think is a very common thing actually for things that are of darkness. And all these...
But here's a question for you. Which is more empty, a field of white or a field of black to you?
Well, don't get ahead of yourself, because this week we're doing dark matters. And next week we're doing nothing matters. So we're going to come to this again.
Okay.
From a slightly different perspective. Really all of them just now, actually, in terms of a chronology of us speaking over several weeks. More than ever, I feel that now we are starting to follow on from things that we have spoken of in the last presentation.
Yeah, it's season 2.
Well, you know, we had Barnett Newman last week with
Sure.
and the zips, and now we don't have any obvious
No zip at all.
No, but what we do have is we have divisible space, but we also have space. And that black space, though it isn't actually purely black, you said something earlier about light being absorbed and taken in.
Sure.
You know, that is like a vacuum. I don't know if you would feel sucked in or actually repelled by this.
I think it depends. It depends how you feel about. I think certain people would find it calming and certain people would find it terrifying. The same way that the deep ocean is both calming and terrifying to different people.
What do you
I find it terrifying. Then again, at the moment, I find everything terrifying. So
if you see Bill Wadman in MoMA, look for a very scared man.
Well, in this particular case, I would have a hard time. I would have a hard time in my best moments, and at the moment, I'm not in my best moment. I would have a hard time having a very dark minimalist painting like this be a favorite of mine. You know, it's like this is generally what I am rebelling against when adding energy to my life. You know, this is my natural inclination would be to slide into this, and I'm constantly fighting not to slide into that. So by taking time to stare at it and potentially understand it or even enjoy it, honestly, it sounds hyperbolic, but it's almost too much of a mental risk for me.
Can I ask, are you
What?
Are you making this representational then?
Well, I think that it becomes even something like this is ultimately representational in a way that it evokes something in the viewer, and so therefore takes on the representation the viewer wants to put into it, whether they see it as a blank space or a hole or emptiness or pain or, you know, death or any one of the other things. I mean, it's going to evoke something in their brain and become representational in some way.
I am interested at, where our associations to black, come from. Obviously, I think purely
Night.
Yeah, the human instinct to want to see, for example.
Yeah, things that are dark are dangerous because I could get eaten, kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's a primitive level where we might.
Sure.
But we also have built cultural associations. And I think that if we could look at them, it's like the ascription of language to things and the attempt to describe facts without really entering into them in some kind of deeply subjective way, perhaps.
Okay.
Can we approach this? I'm just going to read something that Ad Reinhardt himself said about
Sure.
work. I mean, Reinhardt was a leading abstract expressionist, New York school. He was well known in his lifetime. He worked kind of tirelessly. He made lots of paintings. He was prolific, and lots of black painting. But he said, a pure abstract, non-objective, timeless, spaceless, changeless, relationless, disinterested painting. An object that is self-conscious, no unconsciousness, ideal, transcendent, aware of no thing but art.
The idea is that if you remove any sort of representational marks and therefore try to remove any representational meaning, you actually get to some, I don't know, transcendent meaning. You buy that? You buy that theory?
I think it's a very tricky thing because in buying into anything, one is maybe losing the point, but to think that there's a point to something also negates the nothingness. So, I mean,
okay, go ahead, finish your thought. Sorry.
Meaning is damned. To make something meaningless, can that be?
Sure.
To make nothing. I mean, this is the earlier question I asked, can artists make work that is about nothingness? Can we?
I think that by taking something that is nothing and adding to it by making your mark or your decisions or being an artist, you are inherently adding to something that is nothing in the first place. So you can't add stuff and then have it still be nothing.
Well, this is another thing, Reinhardt, there's obviously minimalism, this idea of kind of like a reductionism, a taking away of representation. And
well, I was going to say, I mean, to some extent, you have to look at this in relation to what came before, like the chaos of the height of abstract expressionism. It's like there was nowhere else to go, but entirely in the other direction in some ways.
Yes, but even look at the language that you're using, and we are both using, to have a direction and a movement. And even though that movement might be in theory to reduce to pertain or to try and arrive or reach nothing.
Yeah.
How does one make a movement to nothing?
Yeah, it's like it's like, well, I think you're attempting to achieve nothing, but probably never getting there. It's like it's a little bit like, E equals MC squared. It's like, yeah, you can take a car and accelerate to the speed of light, but it's going to take all the energy and all of the atoms in there in order to get it to the speed of light, at which point you've converted all that mass to energy and you are light in the first place. So it's like the thing you're trying to achieve is something impossible to achieve. And if you do achieve it, you've actually achieved the opposite. It's like inherently fruitless.
I think
if
we look across as much as we can of human art history and think about, black as a presence in the materiality of art making, even if we look at Paleolithic art, the people who daubed on walls and more still made beautiful cave paintings of their like immediate world wanted to use black, and sort of historically what black is represented. Black has actually been quite, or an element of what we might perceive to be black is in the caves at Lusco. It is a useful tool in the definition of shape and form, of course, and even thinking now how it's used as light and shadow photograph.
Isn't it also interesting though that black tended to come from carbon and charcoal, which actually is the remnants of what was light before? So it's sort of it all comes around again, right? I sometimes I wonder whether minimalism like this is sort of a dead end, because like what you're saying is the more work you put in to make it more and more minimal, it's like, okay, so what are you ending up with? You're trying to end up with something less than was there when you started. Well, what's the point of that? What are we adding? What was the point of that work?
I wonder if there's a quality of the pristine. There's certainly an element of the sublime.
Sure.
I've been, as you know, very fortunate to have gone to Giant Gallery in Bournemouth last weekend, and I met Stuart Semple.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, in his own right and anyway, very well known artist. He is also known for a kind of combative approach to Anish Kapoor, who
Vantablack. Yeah, sure.
Worked with the creators of Vantablack and then was the person who had the rights to use it. And I find it interesting that Vantablack is so difficult to use that one can never touch it.
Yeah, it's not, you don't manipulate it in any way that you would normally manipulate a material. In fact, the more that you interact with it, the less you can actually use it. Yeah. Sort of the anti-material in some ways, which is not even ironic. It's actually on point.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's an anti-material, so something that is an anti-material, does that then mean it is immaterial? I mean,
yeah, but even us discussing it, or the artist even considering using that material, is in itself the sort of mental energy that art is made of, right? So,
right. So, I mean, Anish Kapoor himself said that it exists between materiality and illusion.
Sure.
Right.
It's true. Yeah.
There's so many qualities to talking about black, actually, for us as artists, for anyone who's interested in anything, actually. Like, what is black? Like, what is it? And if we spend time talking about it, as you say, or indeed making something that depicts black, are we only ever making an approximation of something we can never attain? And
of course.
In the attempt.
Wait, hold on. Go ahead, finish that.
No, go on, Bill.
I was just going to say that, I think all art is an attempt to try to attain something that we can't attain.
But this is perhaps where there could be a huge conflict for us. It's
for you and I?
No, I mean,
okay.
For anyone interested.
Yeah, sure.
The conflict is that if in the seeking of the thing, we can't find the thing.
Mm-hmm.
In giving the thing the word, we don't make the fact.
You arguably take us further away from the thing by trying to define the thing. This is how I felt about marriage. It's like by making the state be able to say that my wife and I are together, that somehow actually takes away from the autonomy that my wife and I had about being together without the state saying that we were together. It's like that kind of crazy stuff. Yeah, I agree. The more you try to pin something down, the more diluted it becomes.
And indeed, when we talk about delusion, as if by magic.
Where is this one?
So, I mean, this is from the series of black paintings that were in his.
This is at the Prado?
These were in his house.
Yeah. But where are they? They're there now?
I don't know, Bill, actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I just don't know. I don't know how they must be somewhere, because they're studied widely, the black paintings. I don't know.
Yeah.
15 of them. Anyway, I mean, Goya, descent into madness, really. He started going deaf. I don't know if he had a virus or something when he was in middle age.
Yeah.
And he was very embittered. That word pops up a lot if you read about Goya. This idea that he wasn't just cantankerous. I mean, he was actually rage as a human. He was human rage in art and madness, maybe. But he was a very fine painter, as we know. And these images were really quite reactionary paintings. And the black paintings, you know, it's not just the name that places this work here in this presentation, but also the context, dark matter, you know, things of darkness. And again, the ascription of meaning to that phrase or word. And these are dark paintings. They're meant to be disturbing and disruptive. What's fascinating historically is that he didn't tell anyone about them. They were just in his house.
Yeah.
You know,
In some ways, this is what came out of his own despair and insanity.
Yes, and actually he didn't even title them. So where we have titles for all of them now, those have just been given really by art historians since their kind of inception. And also, you know, a friend after his death catalogued them.
Yeah.
But anyway, Atropos, this particular one is the Fates. And black as a pigment, you know, you go to the store, you want to buy paint, you want to buy black. There are so many blacks. How does one ever really find the black one?
Sure. Well, I think I think it's a little bit like contrasting color in anything, where your perception of it has as much to do with what's next to it as it is what it inherently is objectively.
Mm.
You know, so you can have an image where black is actually not even close to black, but if it's the darkest thing in the image, you perceive it as black, you know.
And I mean, the thing also I think is sort of extraordinary about this series of paintings, there's an odd exception where there's a smear of red. For example, there's the god devouring his son. I can't remember which god it is.
Yeah.
And the streak of blood red is so powerful. But in this one and in most of the others, there's no real balance of color. It's just the death weight of this darkness, real darkness. And I mean, tropos, I mean, the equivalent would be morta.
Yeah.
Goddess of death.
Sure.
And then the other.
Maybe he was just wishing for that.
Well, I think so. But more than that, you know, I think in that sort of sickness in his later life, where, I mean, he like I said, he was deaf. He was a descent of sort of physical decay, psychological decay. We see it in his painting. It's the most extraordinary track of madness, actually, or what we might think of as madness. He gave no reason for these paintings, apart from what we can sort of try and pin in terms of their span. 1819 to 1823 is the 5-year period that he would have been working in when he made these paintings in his house. He was quite scholarly, as a lot of painters would have been. You know, he understood about myth and legend, and he would know that things happening in Spain at that time, there'd been Napoleonic Wars, there'd been a lot of uprising and political turmoil. And he was quite keyed into that as a human, but as I said, highly reactionary. In the image, we've got Prometheus as the male character, maybe, but he left no description, so we can only assume. And also Lachesis and Clotho. One spins the yarn of life, Actually,
Yep.
there's some scissors, waiting to cut the yarn of life. Lachesis measures the yarn of life. There's a hopelessness in this painting that is so kind of breathtaking, actually. I think it's kind of like when I first read Edgar Allan Poe, and I couldn't believe the extraordinary darkness in that literature. And I know it's, gothic and a bit schlocky and kind of romantic, I suppose, in that horror. This is as well, even though that's not necessarily his reason, his rationale for making these paintings.
Do you think that the Greek and Roman myth as a subject matter is still appropriate, or do you think it's the kind of thing that is just sort of, it's what people did because it's a shorthand to explain the story without having to start from scratch?
I don't understand what you mean, Bill.
Well, obviously Goya himself was not, living in ancient Greece. So, it feels like we've taken the mythology of a civilization from 2000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. And still to this day, people use these characters and these stories inside of their stories, or we recreate them as movies with, different characters over the top of them. And same we do is with Shakespeare plays and stuff.
Well, yes, indeed. So now I think I understand a bit better. Why do we have any stories? Why do we have any of them?
Well, and why these stories and not, the stories of Zoroastrians, you know what I mean? Like, what, like of all myth, why do we stuck with Greek myth always in Western thought?
I don't know if we're stuck with it, but also, of course, the obvious answer is that ancient Greece underpins Western culture in a way that is... Well,
certainly the great books people would want you to think that, but yes.
Yes, but Bill, working with what we've got.
Yes, sorry.
I'm not making a political statement. I'm stating a fact.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't see it particular.
I just find it interesting that I think what I guess my point is that beyond the artwork, Goya has chosen a subject matter that is steeped in its own sort of macabre darkness inherently, that it's like he has a cake that he's putting his own frosting on, but that cake is already there right when he begins. But I think some of the biggest part of this, though, like you pointed out for me, is these sort of, I mean, there is color in here, but it's very drab sort of color. And I also wonder how much, I mean, I don't know when this photograph was taken, but if this is what it looked like 200 years ago, or 200 years ago, it's that it's sort of yellowed over time. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder if this is how Goya saw it, or if this is how we see it now, 200 years later.
Well, I think, in lots of these paintings, Goya anyway, before he made his, what we'd think of as like his descent, was already using very muddy palette.
Yeah.
It's just that in his earlier painting, there was often also this brilliance in at least one.
Yeah, shocks of other stuff. Yeah.
Bill, would you mind just for a second ad-libbing? Tell the world about something amazing. Do you know why? Because
why?
My daughter's forgotten to put the chickens away, and I'm really worried.
Sure. I can ad-lib about something amazing. Or we could just edit this out later. Hello, everyone. Chickens.
I heard silence rather than ad-libbing, Bill.
You did hear silence rather than ad-libbing.
What will our viewers make of this?
Well, you can edit it out afterwards. I'll teach you how to edit it out.
I don't want to. It's meant to be one continuous take. Anyway.
Well, then they're going to see me staring into the camera deeply.
Can I just ask?
Sure.
Okay, so we're looking at dark matter. We're looking at two very different paintings, or are we? You know,
I think we're looking at two very different paintings.
And there's nothing for you that makes these have a similar feeling?
It's funny. I find the Reinhardt painting more disturbing than the Goya.
Yeah. Okay.
I think because it's, you know, that there's the reality of there's the, oh, I'm trying to scare you. And then there's the, I'm not even going to tell you how scary the thing is that I'm trying to scare you with. You're going to scare yourself with it, kind of thing. And it's funny that, isn't it funny though, that I go to, if something is black or dark, there's fear in that for me. There's no comfort, you know, even though I find comfort in sleep, which is black and dark. Oh, it's interesting.
I think this would be something for us to return to next week, I think, where we're not talking just about black, you know, where there's just nothingness.
Yeah.
Because we might find that there's actually not an opposing view, but a contradiction.
But I mean, I guess we also should talk about in some ways whether or not there's actually virtue in nothingness, or whether it's a false idol that people are following.
But look at that.
You know,
are you not looking for something in that? You know,
you mean that I already know the answer? What do you mean?
Well, you know, here we go, a big word like virtue, very corrosive word, actually, virtue, put in the way of nothing, as if, again, we want to approach nothing and give it something when it's nothing. I find it really so.
Yes, but hold on a second. But in here, go back one frame for a second. You know, one slide, please. Reinhardt is trying to put a frame around nothing. Mm-hmm. You know, so he's taking nothing and making it something. Nothing would be not making this piece of work in the first place.
Right.
By making it, you've made something. So trying to call it nothing is ridiculous.
So art is always something.
Yeah, kind of.
And
I think so.
Look how many artists have invested, again, listen to the language, how many artists have invested in this approach. And actually, you know, even thinking about the ancient sort of wisdom and philosophy that then gets tied in and married up with art, particularly in wabi-sabi, for example, and the making of pots and of other kind of artifacts, where there's not negation, but absence or a voluntary state of poverty. Yet still there's the action of making and also of having made.
Anyway. You think there's a weird puritanical thing in this too? I mean, even you were just saying sort of like there's this, you know, there's an estate kind of, I'm going to give away my wealth and live minimally. And there's virtue in that. I mean, I bet you Reinhardt and some of his contemporaries would say that there is, I mean, you bumped on the word virtue, but like that there is something good about less, or something better about less.
I'm sure that you know, as do I, you know, very many quite affluent people who like to toy with the idea.
Thrown it all away.
Of just giving it all up. But that, of course, is the luxury of their privilege.
Sure. And very few of them ever do.
Right. I mean,
Well, it just, all that shows you though, is that in the case of money and that's not going to make you happy if you're not already happy. So, that's the fool's errand of the modern world where, if only I were rich, I would be happy and I wouldn't have to make depressing art. But it doesn't work that way. I don't know. It's like, like I said before, I personally just wonder about the eventual goal of this sort of abstraction with this minimalism. It feels like you're going down a cul-de-sac and there's really no way out. Cause like, what are you going to outdo somebody by being even more minimal than them? And it's like, okay, where does that lead to? That doesn't go anywhere.
Are you a bit angry about this though?
Well, I'm angry. I'm not angry about it. I don't really care either way. I am a little bit, I'm opinionated about it. Cause it's an example of the kind of thing that I think makes people in the modern world dislike contemporary art and modern art, which is the idea that this is some deep idea that I've had that no one else, that I'm the first one who had, and I created this thing that, unless I explain it to you, doesn't actually say anything specific, but it shows that I'm way more deep than you are, and therefore, ultimately unapproachable. And I think it just leads to people running away from art, the average person running away from art in our modern world.
And isn't it then fascinating, though, that the people perhaps who make such work want to suggest that there is maybe not an accessibility, but that by making something that is empty as much as it can be, that anyone is welcome.
Yeah, but I think that backfires.
Okay.
I think that your average person standing in front of this thing would not find it accessible. They'd be like, what the blank is this?
But is there not also a point in all viewing experience where one sometimes doesn't have to understand using our memory or our language, where there's some other thing? Reinhardt was talking about the sublime, and that's
Sure.
a very conceited thing, I think, to talk about. However, I think there are, regardless of what education one has had, there are always these moments where one can encounter something that is so profound for no known reason. For no known reason.
Yes, but I think that nothing and everything and sublime and what was the word you just used? I'm sorry. What word did you just use? Anyway, I think that all of those are words that only like at the very least, no, at the most, using those words is the least you can do to describe something that once you describe it, you ruin it. And I think trying to take a concept, turn it into a word, and then turn that word into art, I think in the end, you actually are further away from the thing you were trying to portray than you started. But it could just be my depression talking. I don't know.
Oh, Bill. Well, much as you're saying that we're further away from where we started, if ever we try to make something that is about nothing, we are actually right back at where we started. This notion that there's is in being active in what one might think of as creativity.
Yes.
Is actually any creativity at all? Is there the creative life spark? What is that thing? And can we find it if we look for it? Do we know it when we see it? Can we make it happen when it doesn't naturally? Is it something that we have control over? Of course not.
See, I would say that we do have some control over it, but I would say, ooh, this is going to be tricky. And does here's the Bill Wadman quote of the episode. Okay. I think all art is additive. I don't think that you can take away. I don't think you can actively take away. I think you can only add. And I mean, you could argue that, well, you know, Bernini was taking marble away from the block of marble. Yes, but he was adding beauty to that block of marble. He was, you know, adding form to that block of marble. And I think that it is maybe folly to try to take away by adding. It's just, it's, you know,
I was thinking
it doesn't get you anywhere. Go ahead.
Thinking about this to do with your photographs and my photographs. And I'm going to be uncustomarily compartmentalizing about this for a second. I was thinking, you said a couple or a few episodes ago about the fact that you are building something creatively when you make your photograph.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I don't build anything. I'm very passive. I'm using available light, whereas you're actioning and adding light. So
often, yes.
Yeah. But your work is entirely additive. There's no criticism in that.
Okay, but go ahead, finish your.
I wouldn't say then that my work is subtractive or in any way taking anything away. It's simply passively recording. Now, one might traditionally be called art, whereas the other may be called simply being, but happening to be in a position to stop what is there. And I was thinking about the purpose of that stopping. There's a purpose to making something that is additive, always.
Yep. But you see this the stuff you do where you're in a space and you see a certain thing in front of you as you not adding to it. You are adding to it in the sense that you're putting a frame around it. Remember when we did the episode where I was mean and tricked you into thinking the subway wall art was art?
Well, it was art.
Well, okay. Back to episode 6. I guess it is art. But your argument was that by me taking a picture of it, I made it art, right? This was part of our conversation.
Yes, but I would just like to say that even had you not taken a photograph of it and put a frame around it, it would still have existed in a form in which it could be consumed as art.
Okay, because why? Because it was on the wall in a man-made place?
Yeah.
Okay, so is everything art? Is the dog poop on the sidewalk outside my apartment if I shot it from my fire escape art? I mean, this is my problem with having a very broad view of what is and what is not art, is that you very quickly get to the point where either everything has to be art or nothing is, because anywhere in between, the people disagree on where the line is.
In which case, would you rather live in a world in which everything is art or nothing is art?
Is there any difference between the two things?
Well, you're the one who's proposing it.
It's like in the Incredibles. If everybody's special, then no one is.
And then here we are at our accessibility point. So we better stop, Bill. Also, you have a shoot to do.
I do have a shoot to do. Yeah.
Interesting.
I have to go, you know, make some additive art.
Okay, we'll have fun with that.
Thank you, Sandi. It was delightful talking to you as always.
I know.